Shaw. First question was, is this live for Shaw? And it's taped for Shaw. They can't do it live. And so it'll show 3 times over the next 3 days. That's already. And it'll be posted to the Chamber of Commerce's YouTube channel tomorrow. Good evening, my name is Kim Smythe. I am President and CEO of the Nanaimo Chamber, and we look forward to presenting this All Candidates Forum tonight. I'd like to start by acknowledging we live, work, and play on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, most notably the Nanaimo, Tsuminas, and Stonaz, to whom we pay respect for that privilege. I'd like to thank the candidates tonight, and starting on the left, we have Lisa Marie Barron from the NDP. Beside her, we have Michelle Corfield of the Liberal Party of Canada. Sitting in the center, our moderator, Carrie Chassels. And to her left, we have Tamara Cronus from the Conservative Party of Canada. To Tamara's left, we have Paul Manley, Green Party. And on Paul's left, we have Stephen Welton, People's Party of Canada. Welcome everyone tonight. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Nanaimo News Bulletin, Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, Canadian Home Builders Association, the Vancouver Island Construction Association, and the Nanaimo branch of the National Association of Retirees for making this event possible through their financial contributions. I'd also like to thank the members of the Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce for prioritizing election awareness through this nonpartisan event. A little explanation on the questions. For the last few weeks, we've been inviting questions from the public, questions from chamber members, questions from our sponsors. Some of you have sent in questions, which we greatly appreciate. The questions we asked tonight may not look like the questions you emailed to us, because at the end of the day, we take 50 or 60 questions, and we try to boil them down into what we think are the 13 issues areas that Nanaimo voters are interested in. We also try to paraphrase the questions so we give as much time as possible to candidates answering the questions so we get as much information as possible from this event. Finally, I thank our volunteer timekeepers, Heather Fisk and Dirk Heidemann, advisor Merv Unger, coordinator Roberta Bowman, and our moderator, Dr. Carrie Chassels, whom I now invite to take over the mic.
And good evening, everybody. Welcome to our All Candidates Forum. The order of speaking for introductions will be in alphabetical order as the candidates are seating and were introduced by Kim. The timekeeping, each candidate will have 45 seconds to introduce themselves and the key issues on their minds, and will also have 45 seconds for closing remarks. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to respond to the questions that have been compiled in the process that Kim mapped out, and all candidates are holding in their hands 5 cards for rebuttal that they can use to provide a 30-second rebuttal to any of the responses that are provided by the candidates. We have our timekeepers who are going to help us stay on time, and without further ado, I'm going to begin by turning it over to Lisa Marie for an introduction.
Microphone's working? Okay, thank you. Squale, good day. I'd like to acknowledge, first and foremost, that we are on the traditional territories of the Nanaimo First Nations. My name is Lisa Marie Barron. In my day-to-day, I'm seeing too many impacted by a lack of leadership in this riding. Justin Trudeau has made promises but never delivers. And we know that when Conservatives are in government, they make cuts to the public services that we need. And the Greens, well, they're fighting amongst themselves instead of fighting for people. We need real action now. We are in a climate crisis, an overdose crisis, a housing crisis. Our kids just don't have time to wait any longer. You can count on Jagmeet Singh and I to fight for solutions so we can make life better for everyday people. Thank you.
Introductions from Michelle.
Chu Klekos Nanaimo Masnimo. I'd like to recognize also the Snanawas, the Stamanis, and Liaxin people. Good evening, I'm Dr. Michelle Corfield, your Liberal candidate for Nanaimo Ladysmith. I'm a lifetime resident of Nanaimo and have chosen to raise my family, work, and build businesses here for decades. I have given back to the community by sitting on local boards and government-appointed committees to enhance our vibrant community's interests and well-being. I will use my education, skills, and experience to advance constituents' growth, well-being, and prosperity in this riding, especially as we work towards post-pandemic economic recovery plan for all Canadians. We need action now. We need to fight climate change and leave a safe, healthy environment for our children and our grandchildren. We need to ensure that we support our seniors, youth, and families with a real solution to our real problems we face.
Thank you. And Tamara?
Thank you, Carrie. I'm grateful to the Chamber, to the First Nations on whose territory we are meeting, to my fellow candidates, and to those watching at home. This election is about you and your family. It's about affordability. It's about the future. We have to put a stop to inflation. Constant increases in the cost of groceries, your cell phone bill, gas, and housing hurts us all. Canada's Conservatives have the right plan to drive economic recovery and secure our future. You can check it out at conservative.ca. Issue by issue, now's the time to get to work, and I'm ready to work hard for all of us. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Paul?
Thank you. I want to start by recognizing that we're on the traditional territory of the Nanaimo First Nation, and it's been a real honor and privilege to serve the communities within the traditional territory of Snanawas, Nanaimo, Stamanis, and Liaxin First Nations. Over the past 2 years in Parliament, I've been a leader on issues that are important to Nanaimo Ladysmith. My work on housing affordability, long-term care, guaranteed livable income, and protecting old-growth forests has influenced the policies and platforms of other parties. I worked across party lines and successfully passed a motion in Parliament, as well as amendments that have directly improved Canada's laws. I've demonstrated that one hardworking MP can do, and I'm grateful to all community leaders who have recognized my work and endorsed me for re-election.
Stephen?
Good evening. My name is Stephen Welton, and I'm here proudly representing the PPC. I'm representing the only party strongly pushing back against creeping socialism. I stand here representing the only party that will protect your rights and freedoms. Only the PPC supports your right to choose whether to be vaccinated. Only the PPC will stand against these discriminatory vaccine passports, and only the PPC will treat taxpayers, the people who have built and run this country, with the respect they deserve. You don't have to choose a leftist in this election. You can choose the PPC.
Thank you, candidates, for your opening remarks. And I will advise Michelle that she'll be responding first to our first question. It's with regard to the election process. All candidates will have an opportunity to respond in order, in rotation, as to who responds first. Michelle, answering first to the question, what do you think we have to gain from this election? And what do you think about retaining the first past the post format?
Number one, we will maintain and gain the voice of Canadians. This election was a necessity because the Conservatives kept trying to take down government during the early days of the pandemic and throughout the pandemic. It was better to call a planned election so you could decide how we would get through the pandemic. BC voters had already rejected first past the post, so we aren't looking at that.
Thank you. Tamara?
Oh, that was awful.
This is our third trip to the polls in 28 months. Justin Trudeau knows that no one wanted an election during a pandemic. Whatever system we use, it's wrong that British Columbia has 16% of Canada's population and only 12% of the seats. It's wrong that by the time the polls close here, the election is already decided. I will fight for our fair share of seats in the House and the Senate.
Paul.
Thank you. This was a completely unnecessary election. The House of Commons was working. It's been called during a pandemic, during the worst wildfire season Canada has ever experienced. The NDP had given the Liberals a blank check of unconditional support, and with no ambitious plan to hold them to account on fixing social programs, on climate action, on a whole host of things that we could be working on in the House of Commons. We're here now.
Obviously, this election was an opportunistic attempt by Trudeau, without a care for Canadians who are dealing with a pandemic, and out here in particular with wildfires. And I experienced the flaws in this system in which there are people voting before I was even on the ballot. It's a terrible system that advantages the incumbents with foreknowledge and with tax dollars to spend on their campaigns.
Lisa Marie?
Thank you. We know this isn't the election anyone wanted except for Trudeau. We're in the fourth wave of a pandemic. We're in a climate emergency. Instead, this election is here now. While Jagmeet wanted to work on solutions, Justin Trudeau dissolved the House. We need more New Democrats in Parliament to get the work done. We have 24 seats currently. Imagine what can be done with more. As far as proportional representation, we know that this is the way forward to have more diverse voices in the country.
Thank you. And Tamara is going to start a response for the next question. So with regard to the cost of living, the Chamber continually hears about the increasing general unaffordability of everything. Today we heard that inflation passed the 4% mark. What do you suggest the federal government can do about rising costs of living?
Before you go to vote on Monday, I want you to go to the supermarket. Fill up your tank with gas. Look at your cell phone bill. Then, open up your wallet and look at the pictures of your children and grandchildren. We cannot afford another Liberal government propped up by the NDP. Conservatives got this country through the last economic recession by making smart investments that pay off in jobs and better infrastructure and more livable communities. We can do it again.
Thank you. Paul.
We have growing wealth inequality in this country. We have stagnated wages for workers. We have a consolidation and monopolization by corporations who are accumulating huge amounts of wealth, and the ultra-wealthy are accumulating huge amounts of wealth. We need higher corporate taxes, wealth taxes, and regulations to protect consumers. COVID has created problems with our global supply chain. Climate change has disrupted food production, increased insurance costs and other costs. And we need to relocalize our economy to mitigate climate change. These are all issues I've been working on.
Thank you. And Stephen.
Interesting comments there, given that carbon taxes are at the heart of a lot of our inflation. Carbon taxes that are supported by the other parties. Carbon taxes cause farms and food manufacturing plants and transportation and grocery stores to have to increase price of food. That's the basic problem, is too high taxes, and in this case, the form of carbon taxes.
Lisa Marie.
Thank you. On the ground, working with people in my day-to-day work and addictions, and also as a mother, it's evident that things are unaffordable. There's too many who are having to choose between food on the table or a roof over their head. It's time that we start making some positive changes to make this community more affordable for everyday people. While Trudeau and Conservatives have teamed up to protect the ultra-rich, Jagmeet Singh is here to fight for people and to make life more affordable with affordable housing, a living wage. Thank you.
We need to continue to support small businesses and to support a strong economic recovery. Canada's debt to GDP ratio is now 5% points lower than forecast in April federal budget. Thanks.
Rebuttal from Stephen?
The reason the Liberals have to support small businesses is because they're driving them out of business with the regulations around COVID.
I think you're talking about Miss Bonnie Henry.
Okay, thank you. And Paul will respond first to the question about the housing market. Median home prices are soaring in most areas of the country. In Nanaimo, they're up around 20% year over year. How will your party address the rising costs of housing and reintroduce affordability into the housing market?
Well, in February of this year, I asked for a national debate on a national housing emergency because the situation we have in Nanaimo is the same across the country. We need to build more affordable housing, but we cannot build our way out of the crisis unless we deal with the root cause of that crisis. I tabled motion M66 in the House of Commons, and it changed the dialogue in debate. We need stronger regulation. We need to end predatory investment. We need to end tax evasion and money laundering by the ultra-wealthy, and we need to protect existing affordable housing units.
This is a basic economic equation, supply and demand. When you make it more difficult to build homes with excessive regulations and more expensive with carbon taxes affecting the entire supply chain, while at the same time having excessively high levels of immigration driving demand, that's what you get, higher prices. Lower or no carbon taxes and more modest immigration numbers are the best federal response.
Our current housing situation has been years in the making. We know that this has been, it has not occurred overnight. We know that O'Toole voted against 500,000 affordable units. This has been years of protecting big developers, and we're seeing the result. We need more than just talk in Parliament. We need action. We need to take big money out of housing. We need to make housing more affordable both for home buyers and renters. We need to have a 20% foreign buyers tax and to stop money laundering.
The Liberal platform has concrete steps to help first-time homeowners get into a new home, build more homes, and protect your rights, while supporting municipalities in helping them develop capacity around building development.
Tamara?
So this is something we all agree on, and I hear it all day at the doors. You can ask any real estate agent. There just isn't enough housing. We need to build housing that families can afford, not just more rental units, but more houses, apartments, and strata at all price points. We've got to keep up with our growing population. And along with that, and this is where we've got something additional, we need to build the infrastructure to support it. Hospitals, schools, and roads with overpasses.
Paul with a rebuttal?
We have serious problems with our housing affordability market. And right now we have predatory investors, huge corporate investors who are buying up affordable housing stock and flipping it into market rate housing. We need rent and vacancy control protection for renters right across this country. The problem with some of the plans that have been presented, they give subsidies to construction, but that housing is only affordable for 10 years or 20 years. And what we're seeing now is subsidized housing that was built with government tax money in the 60s and 70s flipped into market rate.
Thank you. And a rebuttal from Lisa Marie?
Thank you. Conservatives are talking about investing in market housing, while what we are talking about as New Democrats is talking about housing that people can afford, that looks at a national housing strategy for across Canada, an Indigenous housing strategy alongside Indigenous people, with Indigenous people, that looks at rentals, co-ops, and allows us to be creative with finding options that fit families of all income brackets. Jagmeet is committed to 500,000 new affordable homes across Canada.
Thank you. And Tamara?
We need to build houses across the market because people who can't find homes are taking up rental units, which is making the shortage of rental units worse. The city of Nanaimo is getting emails every day from people who want to come here and work and help us with our labor shortage, but they can't find housing, so they have to leave. We have a detailed plan for housing at conservative.ca. It's a real plan to build 1 million homes in the next 3 years, not just a promise.
Stephen, a rebuttal?
The solution has to be in the private sector. The government does not have a good track record of building homes for people. The government's track record on doing anything, frankly, at most levels, is what I witnessed this past summer when I stood on my deck and watched one guy in a hole with 6 guys standing around watching him for the entire day. They had a crew of traffic safety people to divert you around the cars that were just there for the supervisors. That's the government's way of doing things.
Tamara, rebuttal?
So our plan isn't just a commitment to build homes. It lays out how we're going to do it. It explains how we will eliminate money laundering in the housing market, how we will ban the sale of homes to people who aren't going to live here. And it explains how we will help first-time home buyers get enough for a down payment by modifying the mortgage stress test and making it easier for people to switch mortgage lenders when they refinance.
Thank you. Stephen's going to respond first to our question about childcare. Do you and your party support universal childcare, or what alternatives do you propose?
The PPC supports Canadian families. We will take concrete steps to reduce the cost of living for all Canadians. Sure, everyone wants to be handed money, but government has a poor track record at taking money from someone and handing it to someone else. We'll be focused on making life more affordable for all Canadians. If you keep more money in your pocket, you don't need a handout.
Lisa Marie?
As a mother and surrounded by parents, I know firsthand that childcare is too expensive and it is inaccessible. There's not enough of it. The Liberals have had 6 years to create more affordable childcare for families and have yet to actually follow through with that promise. The Conservatives don't address the long wait lists or access to childcare. Jagmeet is committed to $10 a day childcare, building a universal childcare program for families where all parents can have access to affordable, safe childcare for their children.
Michelle?
$10 day daycare is a priority, and making childcare a right is also a priority for the Liberals. And when we support children, we support women.
As a small business owner, childcare was critical to my ability to work. A Conservative government will cover up to 75% of childcare costs for low-income families. We'll do it throughout the year so that families don't have to wait until tax time. We'll do it in a way that gives families real choice between licensed childcare and home care to encourage real solutions beyond traditional 9-to-5 childcare centers. And we would make the credit refundable so that low-income families get the refund even if it pushes their tax bill below zero. This is really important.
Thank you. Paul?
Well, the Green Party supports universal, equitable, affordable early learning and childcare. The pandemic has disproportionately affected women, impacted women, and we need accessible childcare as an essential part of pandemic recovery, especially for women. We need to learn from the model that already exists in Quebec and ensure that we have national standards, just like we need for long-term care, and work on a nonprofit model to support a nonprofit model.
Thank you. And Lisa Marie is going to respond first to our question for all candidates with regard to long-term care. How would your party enact measures to better respect and care for our elders and our aging population?
Our seniors deserve better, which is, we saw it through the pandemic. How many seniors died in long-term care? We know for every senior that died in a nonprofit long-term care home, 4 died in a for-profit long-term care home. We need to take the profit out of our care for our seniors and for our loved ones. Liberals have underfunded the health care for years now. We need to take the we need to pay workers fairly. Thank you.
Michelle?
A re-elected Liberal government will establish a safe, long-term care act, improve the quality and availability of long-term care homes and beds, implement strict infection prevention and control measures.
Tamara?
Seniors' issues are critical in this riding. It has one of the largest populations of seniors of any riding in the country, and I am going to love fighting for seniors' issues in the House of Commons. We need to fix everything about long-term care. It needs a 360-degree overhaul and investment. We need to make it safe, we need to make it affordable, and we need to meet the need for more personal support workers to improve working conditions in long-term care homes.
Paul?
When I was elected, I was made aware of the atrocious conditions at Nanaimo Seniors Village, which the Liberal government had allowed to be purchased by a Chinese insurance corporation and subsequently taken over by the Chinese state. We have no room in this country for foreign ownership for our seniors' homes. We need to respect and protect our seniors. That's why I tabled motion 77 to fix the crisis that was apparent in the pandemic. It was costed by the Parliamentary Budget Office in full, and it has influenced the party platforms of other parties.
Thank you. A rebuttal from Lisa Marie?
The Liberals have underfunded healthcare and prioritized the profits for big corporations for far too long. We need to make changes to our long-term care homes. We need to make sure that our workers are paid fairly, who are taking care of our seniors and our loved ones. We need our workers to have a living wage, to have benefits from head to toe Pharmacare that allows them to show up to care for seniors in the way that they deserve, with the dignity and respect they so desperately deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. And Stephen, to respond to the first question?
Our elders built this country. We will respect and protect them by treating their tax dollars more carefully, by not throwing money around like Trudeau does, by not taxing their homes as Trudeau intends. My mother spent her declining years in a long-term care situation. The sale of her home is essentially what financed her care there, largely. And if Trudeau were to have taxed that before she got to use it, it would have been a problem.
A rebuttal from Michelle?
Oh, absolutely not true. The Liberal government does not intend to tax anyone's primary home.
Stephen?
So I understand that you were denying what was Trudeau's announcement, a bill that went forward, that there would be tax on principal residences, on the gains on a principal residence.
Paul, for a rebuttal, thank you.
So I just want to address the plan that I put forward, M77, because it's really important that we look after seniors properly. And the Parliamentary Budget Office costed it out, and what it said was there's 52,000 seniors waiting for beds. Many of them are in our hospitals. That the average amount of care was substandard, that the average pay for workers was less than what they deserved, and that we need to fund home care, home care, home care to keep seniors where they can live in place, because it saves money in the system in the long-term care process. Check out my plan, M77.
Thank you. No additional rebuttals on that question. I'm going to turn to our next question, and Michelle will be our first respondent. The subject matter is with regard to healthcare. With an aging population, increasing in-migration of semi-retired and retired in Nanaimo, and rapid population growth all around, how will you support more and better health care with only a regional hospital to serve nearly 500,000 people north of the Malahat?
Number one, healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction. The Liberal government will increase federal transfer payments and will strengthen federal power under the Canadian Health Act and the Federal Provincial Fiscal Arrangement Act. I know as well as you, we need infrastructure money into Nanaimo. Oh, just about 500,000 people live here and they need better care. I will fight for that care.
Tamara.
A Conservative government will increase the annual growth rate of the Canada Health Transfer to at least 6%, which will inject nearly $60 billion into our healthcare system in the next 10 years. That's a significant boost, and I will work with the BC government to fix our family doctor problem, to fix our need for cardiac and cancer care in Nanaimo Ladysmith, and make it so that our families and seniors don't have to go to Victoria or leave the island to get the care they deserve. And if the BC government doesn't do that, we should vote them out.
Paul.
Thank you. Well, the federal government used to put infrastructure money into healthcare infrastructure, and the Conservatives and the Liberals abandoned that. And I have been advocating actively in the House of Commons for reinvesting in healthcare infrastructure, focusing on the acute needs here in the Mid-Island region because we have the largest seniors population per capita and a growing population. And our hospital should be a tertiary hospital. It should have cancer care, cardiac care, and an expanded hospital will in fact attract doctors to our region. We have an acute shortage of doctors as well.
Thank you. Stephen.
So, indeed, most of us have had disappointments with our healthcare system. But let's not pretend Ottawa has the reins on this. The provinces control healthcare dollars. Ottawa can work with the provinces, can work on the structure of how that money is paid out to the provinces for their disbursement, but they have the ultimate call on it. So these various promises that you're hearing here about what a federal MP is going to do for hospitals here, I think they're hollow promises.
Thank you.
The last time that we had a Conservative Prime Minister, he'd made cuts of $36 billion from provincial health care transfers. Trudeau, unfortunately, kept and maintained those cuts, and we're seeing the impacts now in our hospitals. We're seeing hallway medicine, we're seeing overcrowded ERs, doctors and nurses who are leaving their positions too stressed to stay in them when we need them most. We need more funding to our healthcare system to care for seniors, to care for everybody in this riding. We need a Pharmacare system as well.
Thank you. And Tamara will respond first to our question on climate change. The signs of climate change are clear as a bell, and the negative impacts are being faced right now. Outline what policies your party is committed to slow that change.
So our plan promises action on climate change in 3 ways. First, we would work with the provinces to create personal low-carbon spending accounts so that federal carbon levies stay in your hands and don't go into government pockets. Your household knows best how to reduce its carbon footprint, not the government in Ottawa. Second, we would encourage climate change innovation by funding it in carbon capture and storage, hydrogen fuel, and electric vehicle development. Third, we'd go after the big polluters with all our might on the world stage.
Paul?
Thank you. Climate change is a threat to the security and safety of our communities. We learned that firsthand this summer in the interior. Canada has the worst record on climate in the G7. I'm one of the top 3 MPs bringing up climate change in the House of Commons, and we saw with the Climate Accountability, the so-called Accountability Act, one of the weakest pieces of legislation as the Liberals and NDP held hands under the table to pass a bill that has no accountability to it at all. We have lots of plans to deal with climate change.
Stephen.
I have 2 undergraduate degrees in earth sciences. I'm very well aware of climate change. It's been a long-term thing. The history of the earth tells us that. However, we at the PPC, we do not agree with the climate hysteria that is going on. We understand the difference between climate and weather, and we do not believe that carbon taxes, just transferring money around, is the way to deal with this situation. Yes, there has to be research into new technologies, but we're not about to die.
Lisa Marie.
We're seeing the effects of climate change all around us. It's evident that we are experiencing a climate crisis with forest fires and heat waves to the extremes that we've never seen before. While the Conservatives continue to not agree whether climate change is real, and Trudeau's Liberals have bought a pipeline instead of actually addressing the targets that they met, Jagmeet Singh is committed to lowering greenhouse gas emissions, ending oil subsidies. Jagmeet has committed to $500 million to Indigenous-led conservation and creating just transitions for workers.
Thank you. Michelle.
Independently graded, the Liberal plan, 8 out of 10. The Conservative plan, 5 out of 10. The Green plan, 4 out of 10. The NDP plan, 2 out of 10. We are committed to reaching our 2030 targets and net zero emission by 2050, creating green jobs, ensuring clean air and water for our kids and our grandkids. We are committed to climate change action.
Paul, rebuttal?
Yeah, the Liberal plan is really empty. And what we need to do is listen to the scientists and the International Panel on Climate Change. And they're saying that we need to end all subsidies for fossil fuels. We need to ban fracking. We need to phase out coal for energy production. And we need to ban the export of coal here. We need to convert all of our energy production to renewable, geothermal, tidal, wind, solar, and hydro, and we need to do it fast. And the Liberal plan, the NDP plan, they continue to support fracking. They continue to support pipelines.
Thank you. Lisa Maria, rebuttal?
We've known for decades that our planet and future depends on lowering greenhouse gas emissions, yet here we are. The future of our planet and each and every one of us depends on us taking action now. Jagmeet Singh and New Democrats are doing the work in Parliament to address the climate crisis, not just talking about it, but proposing solutions and acting on them. Jagmeet Singh has made it clear that there's no future in fracking, natural gas development, or fossil fuel development. We need to be investing in good, clean energy.
Michelle, a rebuttal? No, he was Okay, sure. Go ahead. Stephen?
Just so you know, my name is Stephen Welton, and I'm representing the PPC. So, just to address some of these solutions that have been worked on, I mean, electric cars, 35 years worth of carbon emissions involved in just manufacturing them. Solar panels, they have to run for about 5 years just to recoup the electrical energy that went into making them. Okay? These solutions are not available broadly right now in a realistic way. It's research level stuff.
Thank you. And rebuttal from Michelle?
I actually won't disagree with you on that. We need a proper transition plan to transition off of fossil fuels. But I will say, and I do know, that the Liberals have invested heavily in addressing the cumulative effects that are impacting our ocean. And the work that we've been doing with Indigenous communities up and down this coast is phenomenal. And I am so proud of that work because I was a part of designing some of it, and it's now being implemented.
Tamara, rebuttal?
I want to be clear that we recognize that climate change is important and that we need to do our part in Canada. But we also need to go after the big polluters on the world stage with whatever voice Canada has, because Canada needs to be, while Canada needs to be a climate change leader, we can't do it alone.
Paul?
Well, when I bring up climate change in the House of Commons, I can't even get Jagmeet Singh to say the word fracking when I ask him if he'll support a ban on fracking. The Conservatives can't agree that climate change is real. You know, we are one of the top 5 emitters on the planet per capita. We have a 0.5% of the population, 2% of the emissions, and that doesn't include what we export. We are a climate laggard. We are behind other countries, and we should be doing what the UK did and create a carbon budget, not this so-called Unaccountability Act.
Thank you. And a rebuttal from Lisa Marie?
Thank you. You know, right now we're in a climate emergency. Our children need us to be acting now, not just talking about what's happening. We need a party that can push to make things happen. Bill C-12 wasn't the bill that New Democrats would have created, but they pushed to increase targets, increase accountability, and to allow us to move forward in the right direction. If you look at the parliamentary transcripts to see who's really fighting in Parliament, you'll see that the NDP are the party who's doing it. Look at Peter Julian and his work around the Green New Deal, for example.
Thank you. And Stephen?
Thank you. If the people of Nanaimo, Ladysmith, if everybody bought an electric car tomorrow, the world climate, global climate would not be affected at all. If everybody in Canada bought an electric car tomorrow, global climate would not be altered at all. These are fake solutions, and we're being penalized, punished with high carbon taxes, where we pay more for heating our homes and the food that goes on our tables. We can't afford that.
Thank you, candidates. And Paul will be the first respondent on our question with regard to reconciliation leadership. How will you work both locally and in Ottawa to meet the commitments outlined in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action?
Well, I've been very active on this file, and we need to implement all the calls to action for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The first number of calls deal with the removal of Indigenous children. And so we need to eliminate poverty. We need to improve housing. We need to implement the calls to justice for the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls inquiry. And we need economic reconciliation for local First Nations. And that's something I've been working on with them. The land transfer for DND, Indigenous protected and conserved areas, which are a process of sustainable regional economic development.
Thank you. Stephen?
Last week, our party leader, Maxime Bernier, was proud to receive a ceremonial cloak from 5 First Nations leaders in Northern Alberta. He is a champion for First Nations, recognized by them. We cannot change the past, but we can seek the best way to live together harmoniously. We will take measures to replace the paternalistic Indian Act with a structure that empowers First Nations and supports a vision of self-reliance.
Lisa Marie?
After over 150 years of colonization, it is about time that we start walking alongside Indigenous nations and start righting the wrongs that we have created. You know, Trudeau, unfortunately, has made lots of promises, but has only followed through with 10 of the 94 calls to action. We still have nations without access to clean drinking water. Jagmeet is committed to implementing all the calls to action. People see him and understand that he is a compassionate leader who's putting reconciliation at the forefront of every decision.
Michelle?
As an Indigenous person, I will say this. The Liberal government will continue to work in partnership with Indigenous communities to address the issues facing them, such as the legacy of residential school, Indigenous housing, mental health, healthcare, language, just to name a few. 80% of the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action have either been implemented or are well on their way. So.
Thank you. Tamara?
No one in Canada should live under a boil water advisory. No one in Canada should live with rodents and mold. A Conservative government will be a reliable partner in tackling the critical issues like housing that will improve the lives of First Nations across Canada. That's why housing is part of Canada's recovery plan, and it includes a by First Nations for First Nations plan for housing. We will support First Nations communities as they build capacity and forge a secure future.
Rebuttal, yep.
I'm going to say this for the record. Each First Nation that has boil water advisories has created a plan with the Liberal government to address those. This should not be an issue that's being ping-ponged around by leaders of different parties or participants here tonight. These are intimate problems that are happening within communities that they've already planned a way forward.
Thank you. Stephen is going to be our first respondent to a question with regard to small business. Nearly 90% of the businesses in Nanaimo are considered small businesses. How would you propose to support small businesses across Canada, especially those most affected by COVID-19?
It's pretty easy. We will end lockdowns and restrictions, end vaccine passports, let businesses get back to doing business. They're good at it. They've done it before. This problem has been created through the pandemic by foolhardy plans, thinking that these lockdowns are going to work, that they're not going to have these side effects. We've seen the side effects. It's time to stop it. We'll protect the vulnerable, but the rest of us should get back to work.
Lisa Marie?
We have seen the impacts of the pandemic on our small and medium-sized businesses. It's evident we need to do better. Instead, O'Toole and Trudeau continue to line the pockets of the ultra-rich while our small and medium-sized businesses continue to pay the price. Our businesses deserve better. Jagmeet Singh is committed to capping high credit card merchant fees at a maximum of 1%, making life more affordable for workers, overhauling overall credential recognition, and having a plan for Pharmacare that'll save businesses $600 per worker per year.
Michelle?
A re-elected Liberal government will continue COVID supports beyond October, extended the Canada Recovery Hiring Program, provide hard-hit tourism industry with wage and rent support for up to 70% of their expenses, help small businesses expand into the digital economy. We will be here and have been here for small business.
Tamara?
As a goldsmith, I've been a small business owner for more than 15 years. Small businesses have carried a huge burden during COVID, and we have to help them rebuild. A Conservative government would provide a 25% Rebuild Main Street tax credit on amounts up to $100,000 invested personally by Canadians in small businesses over the next 2 years. We would also make Main Street business loans of up to $200,000 available, with 25% to be forgiven, depending on the size of a company's revenue loss during COVID.
Thank you. Paul?
Well, I've been a small business operator in this community for almost 20 years, and I understand that this is the engine of our local economy. I worked really hard to make sure that the local small businesses got the COVID relief that they needed, pushed for higher wage subsidies, pushed for rental relief programs, and I will continue to support small businesses during this pandemic to make sure that those sectors most affected continue to receive the support that they need with programs that are targeted effectively. We need to tax the big giants like Amazon.
Thank you. Lisa Marie is going to be our first respondent to a question with regard to foreign trade. Foreign trade has been challenging throughout the pandemic, especially with Asia Pacific and Chinese trading partners. This is contributing to supply chain issues, foreign trade, inflation, and unaffordability. What's your party's foreign trade policy, and what would you change?
What I'm hearing at the door is people want to see our resources used here locally in Canada, and that workers have the opportunities to have the jobs that coincide. For too many years, Liberals and Conservatives have sold out Canadians. We're seeing the softwood leaving our shores. While these resources are going overseas, we're also having those jobs that are at a loss as well as the environmental impact that results. We know that by keeping jobs local, we are better protecting our environment.
Michelle.
Canada is a trading nation, and trade has an important part to play in our plan for a robust economic recovery. Canada is the only G7 country to have free trade agreements with all G7 countries. It is time to place the promotion of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law at the center of our foreign policy. A re-elected Liberal government will continue to defend the right to free expression and oppose the mistreatment or arbitrary detention of journalists. And pretty proud of the expansion at Duke Point.
Tamara.
Canada needs a principled foreign policy that aligns with Canadian values and interests on the world stage. Under our free trade with free nations policy, Canada would sign trade deals with countries that share our respect for human rights, fair labor practices, and our environmental standards. We would immediately ban products made with enslaved Uyghur labor. The Indo-Pacific region is a great example of a place where we can work to enhance security, trade, and other ties to forge alliances with countries that share Canadian values.
Paul, sorry.
We need fair trade, and that means that we need to have respected labor rights, respected environmental laws, and respected consumer standards. We need to move away from the ripping and shipping of raw resources, raw logs, raw bitumen, raw minerals, and get into value-added manufacturing. Build on the strength of entrepreneurs and innovators in this country. The Vancouver Island Economic Alliance has a trade zone established on Vancouver Island. We have local comparative advantage. We need government support. We need to continue to build our advantage here on Vancouver Island.
Stephen.
I'm sorry, I'm still kind of chuckling about the Liberal comments on free expression. The party that has introduced bills that include essentially censorship. Anyway, our policies on foreign trade will be centered around what's in it for Canada, not what's in it for globalists, not how we look on the world stage when looking for UN positions and the like. We will liberalize trade with our friends, but while ensuring security and protecting our economy from hostile foreign investors.
Michelle will be our first candidate to respond to our question with regard to labor shortages. What tactics would you support to increase the labor supply currently challenging our economy?
First, I want to say I was disheartened to hear that Tilray is going to be leaving our community, and I'm really feel bad for those people that are losing their jobs. I hope with all the students coming back to university that will help fill our staffing shortage that we have in our community right now. However, we need to continue to look to immigration to help fill the shortages that we have across the country. We also have to look at getting more skilled labor trained in all fields and supporting students throughout their training.
Tamara.
So I want to echo Michelle's comments about Tilray. It's brutal news today. In terms of hiring, a Conservative government would help small and medium-sized businesses hire new employees and rehire employees through a Canada Job Surge credit that would cover 25 to 50% of the first year of wages. What that would do is it would reduce our dependence on EI, allow small businesses to train people and to have some room there and to get them up to speed without raising prices, because we've got to control inflation.
Thank you. Paul.
We need to shift the emphasis on COVID supports so that businesses are better able to entice and keep workers. We need to stabilize the industries that have been hardest hit by the pandemic and were forced to lay off workers again and again, and build on our strengths. So we need to train more workers. We have a policy to eliminate tuition fees so that we can get more workers into trades and more workers educated.
Stephen.
The other parties in their support for lockdowns in their support for just paying people to stay at home have caused this problem. There's a simple solution. Stop paying them to stay home, and they're more likely to go to work.
Lisa Marie.
The staff shortages that we're seeing in our community did not happen overnight. We're seeing the impacts that have been amplified through the pandemic. Everything right now in this community is unaffordable. As a single parent in this community, I'm feeling the impacts. I have people around me telling me daily that they're having to choose between basic needs and basic needs and paying for their rent or paying for their medications. We need to make this community more affordable for workers to want to live here and invest in this community and call this place home with affordable housing and a universal Pharmacare plan.
Thank you. And nothing more on that. So moving on, and Tamara will be our first candidate to respond to a question with regard to fisheries. We have an urgent issue in the Discovery Islands where fish farms are facing premature closures of their operations in spite of a timeline agreed upon with the ministry. 1,300 jobs are at risk. In Nanaimo, these include transportation, processing, and marketing positions. What would you do to change this?
We have a detailed strategy laid out in our Canada Recovery Plan for working with the Department of Fisheries and with First Nations that include components to develop a Pacific salmon strategy that's focused on restoring our fish stocks. Let me be clear. We cannot allow these jobs to be at risk, and we need to work with all of the parties involved to find a solution. There should have been more consultation and more real plans for a real transition here.
Paul.
Well, we need to protect our wild salmon stock. But right here in Nanaimo, we have a very successful model of closed containment salmon farming. Taste of BC Aqua Farms has a scalable model for fish farming, clearly demonstrating a way forward for this industry. And I've met with Steve Atkinson, the director, several times, toured the facility, and connected him with the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance. Taste of BC was recently completed a deal with Blue Star Foods Incorporated, and they're investing $500 million onto Vancouver Island for closed containment. This is great news for workers and the processors in this industry.
Stephen.
I'm very sympathetic. 4 times in my life have I been downsized due to corporate restructuring, changes in regulation and the like. So I'm very sympathetic to the individuals, the people involved. We have programs in place to assist displaced workers. And I'll listen to the particular concerns and evaluate what the federal role can be. But it has to be in a framework in which the PPC is, for us, it's less about special treatment, special interest group treatment, than it is for Canadians overall.
Thank you. Lisa Marie.
Yes, I was born in Newfoundland, and we've seen the impacts of what happens when we don't take care of our oceans and our fish. We need to be doing better here, and instead Trudeau has been dragging his heels and addressing the devastating impacts of open net pen salmon farms in BC waters. I signed the Wild First Pledge to push for this to happen. I'm following in the footsteps of Bob Chamberlain, a longtime Indigenous advocate and protector of wild salmon. We need to protect wild salmon, get fish pens out of our oceans and onto land, and protect Indigenous rights while doing so.
Michelle.
Well, I'm first going to say I facilitated all of the conversations on aquaculture when it went from sole jurisdiction of British Columbia to the federal government, and that was only a few years ago. So no, the federal government is not responsible for this in its entirety. However, we all have a part to play in protecting our wild stocks. Conservation has to be the priority. Fish farms have played a major role in island economy, and if we are transitioning from water-based fin fish aquaculture, we need to have a plan that supports the workers during the transition.
Thank you. Paul will be our first candidate to respond to a question with regard to COVID recovery. outline your party's policy for economic recovery, and a one-word answer. National vaccination passport, yes or no?
Well, we need to focus. We've seen how, with COVID, how quickly we can move, and we have a climate emergency. It was declared in 2019, and so we need to focus on a clean energy economy and green infrastructure and put jobs into investing in that. It's a win-win. The pandemic has shown our vulnerability in global supply chains, and we need to focus on relocalizing and creating economic opportunities, and given special consideration for small and medium enterprises.
Stephen.
Allow me to give you the one-word answer. First, it is no. No vaccine passports. I've heard a lot, seen a lot in the policies, in the platforms of the other parties. I've heard a lot tonight of solutions that are all tax, tax, tax. Let's take some money off this person and give it to another person. Okay? COVID recovery, let's just go back to work. End the lockdowns.
Lisa Marie.
Okay, I was trying to decide whether I wanted to go with a one-word answer, yes or not. So what we are committed to in the COVID recovery is looking at the health and safety of every individual, as well as a recovery forward. Absolutely, we are for vaccine passports, and because we want to put the health and safety of Canadians first, to have the consistency that they need, the clarity that they need with the national leadership to be able to move forward together, to not only move through this pandemic, through the fourth wave that we're in right now, but out of this pandemic. We need to increase funding to healthcare along the way, as well as having new affordable homes and student debt relief.
Thank you. Michelle.
Every Canadian has the opportunity now to help shape our plan forward. COVID recovery is the biggest issue we face today. As we plan post-pandemic, we need to ensure we bring all Canadians along. The Liberal government will continue to invest in our Canadian healthcare system and invest in moving to innovation in the green and blue economies. And a mother of an immunized compromised child, I absolutely agree in a national passport.
Tamara.
We have a 160-page plan for economic recovery, Canada's recovery plan. And a Conservative government will be ready to start implementing that plan next Tuesday. We do support a streamlined system that helps Canadians verify their vaccine status when traveling abroad, but we also need to augment vaccination with reasonable measures like rapid testing for those who are not vaccinated.
Thank you. I'm going to move into some questions now that we've collected from members of the Chamber and broader community who submitted some questions. And Stephen's going to be the first to respond to a question that is, tell us about how your last employment position before entering politics prepared you for being elected.
So currently, I run my own small business in my semi-retirement. So I think really what you're asking is my corporate experience, where I was a national training manager at Maple Leaf Foods. My career was based around project management, and it culminated with a national company and working at a senior management level with multi-million-dollar budgets.
Thank you. Lisa Marie.
My position that I'm currently in is I work on the ground with people and addictions frontline. I also am an elected school board trustee advocating for students to have access to equitable education. And most important, I'm a mother of 2 children who want a better future as we move forward. I'm seeing my day-to-day the trickle effect of our federal government underfunding and under-prioritizing this riding. I'm here because I want to move forward in a better way together. Thank you.
Michelle.
I have been a negotiator, mediator, facilitator with all 3 levels of government for over 25 years. I've also been the chair of the port. I've also sat on the College of Physicians and Surgeons, and I have also been the vice president of the Nutchalna Tribal Council. And I have also contributed to the writing of legislation that we have now seen post-2015 into those 4 acts that have been changed. I think I'm well prepared.
Thank you. Tamara.
As the owner of a jewelry manufacturing business, we delivered 100% of our jobs on time in a manner that exceeds client expectations. That's what an MP needs to do. My first job as your member of parliament will be to run a great constituency office where people can come and feel heard and get action. Paul and Lisa Marie keep talking about fighting in parliament. We need action. And Canada's Conservatives are the only party that can deliver the change Canadians want and desperately need.
Paul.
Well, my most recent job was the Member of Parliament for Nanaimo Ladysmith, where I worked across party lines to really get things done in the House of Commons and influence debates, influence policies of other parties on things like affordable housing, long-term care. The Liberals have copied my policy, my private member's bill to ban the export of thermal coal. They're copying my policy on protecting old-growth forests. I've been a very loud advocate for Indigenous rights, and I'm recognized and endorsed by David Suzuki, 350.org, Seth Klein, Lead Now, a whole host of other local people who recognize the work that I've completed.
Rebuttal, Michelle?
But you have not influenced Liberal policy at all. All of our policies come from our annual general meetings, and it's a collectively developed. You have not influenced them, and I even had a conversation with the Prime Minister about this 2 days ago when I raised it about your last debate, and he assured me that you had no role to play.
So before the pandemic, I was the only MP, along with Elizabeth May, talking about guaranteed livable income. That was debated at the Liberal convention. It was debated at the NDP convention. Nobody was talking about it in the House of Commons before me and Elizabeth. With the pandemic, with the long-term care plan that was costed by the Parliamentary Budget Office, you just read my plan and then read the Liberal platform and you will see the similarities. They don't follow through on everything. Read the platform on old growth and read my motion on old growth. You will see the similarities.
First and foremost, the NDP has been fighting for a livable income for decades. This is not something new. This is something that has been fought for a long time now. The reality is the Green Party has some great ideas. Absolutely, there's some things we agree on, but when it really comes down to it, we need a party with official party status that has the people and the power to push things forward. We need more than talk, we need action and solutions that can actually be achieved with a party who can do so. Jagmeet Singh and New Democrats have been pushing all through the pandemic. We've seen the benefits, and we need a New Democrat in Parliament to represent this riding.
Okay, and Lisa Marie will be our first candidate to respond to another question from the community. Tell us about how you and your party will focus on creating more economic independence from the United States.
Yes, more economic independence from the United States. Well, first and foremost, we need to look at making this community a place where workers want to come, build their families, and have the beautiful place that we live also affordable. We need to support workers, we need to support families with affordable homes, a livable wage. We need to have clean transportation. The options are endless of the potential of this riding, and currently we are not meeting them as we do not have that strong voice in Parliament.
Thank you. Michelle.
Well, the highly debated Trans Mountain Expansion Project is an example of getting away from US dependence. And I will say this, each and every one of you who drive a vehicle, your gas comes through that pipeline.
So the answer for conservatives on this topic is fairly straightforward. We would diversify our trade relationships, and we would continue to negotiate free trade agreements with free nations. And that's been a conservative strategy for years. And the more trade we're able to do with other nations, the greater our independence will be overall.
Paul?
We need to relocalize our economies. We are dealing with climate change and we're shipping food all over the place. We need to stabilize our food system to start with, and growing more food in Canada would be a good way to do that. We're seeing droughts in California, and that's going to drive up the cost of food here. So we need to relocalize and think about climate change when we think about how we do trade. We need to be creating an east-west energy grid for electricity rather than having everything going north-south, so that we can share electricity between provinces.
Thank you. Stephen?
I reject the premise of the question. I don't think we have a serious problem with our trade with the US. It's always a work in progress to negotiate these to make sure it stays fair, but the US is a very important neighbor and partner.
Thank you. And Michelle will respond first to a question about Pharmacare. 20% of Canadians have inadequate or no prescription drug coverage, and differing coverage exists across provincial Pharmacare programs. All Canadians should have access to the medications they need, given the important role medication plays in preventing and treating illnesses. What is your party's plan for addressing this inequity?
A national pharmacare strategy has been a part of the Liberal platform since 2019. However, the pandemic did hit and things have slowed down in the implementation. However, I will say that Pharmacare is a provincial jurisdiction, and we need to look at ways to work together to overcome the separation between the jurisdictions. However, a possibility is a national dispensary pharmacy.
Thank you. Tamara?
So I'll go back to our platform, which is that a Conservative government will increase the annual growth rate of the Canada Health Transfer to at least 6%, which will inject nearly $60 billion into our healthcare system in the next 10 years. That's a significant boost, and we will work with the provinces to make sure that it is used wisely for the benefit of all Canadians, including our seniors.
Well, I support a universal pharmacare system in Canada. We are the only country with a universal healthcare system that doesn't include pharmacare. We also need to be including dental care. The bulk buying of pharmaceuticals will save a lot of money in the system. Also, we've seen the Conservatives and the Liberals shut down Connaught Labs, which was a leading laboratory that developed vaccines and distributed them around the world. And we could have used Connaught Labs here in Canada during this pandemic. We used to be a leader, now we're reliant on pharmaceutical companies from elsewhere.
Thank you. Stephen?
The PPC recognizes that pharmacare is a concern for many people, having better access to more affordable medications. We are going to be more than willing to speak with provinces about how the money gets deployed. But again, this is an area where the provinces have the reins. They get to decide where the money is spent on healthcare.
The Liberals all talk but no action when it comes to our pharmacare system is not good enough for too many families and individuals in our community. I think of the family who had a dual income coming in, who worked hard daily, who still could not afford the medications that their daughter needed for her diabetes. This is not good enough. We need head-to-toe pharmacare that allows individuals to not have to choose between food on their table or the medications that they need. We need this to include mental health supports, dental, eyeglasses, and everything in between.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to a question, Tamara will be the first to respond to a question about better well-being for veterans and their families. For many veterans, transition to civilian life can be challenging and can mean that ill or injured veterans are unable to access financial, health, and other benefits and services from Veteran Affairs. Many veterans lack confidence in Veterans Affairs after having difficulty accessing programs and long waits for service. How would your government address these concerns?
Our veterans are incredible patriots who would put their lives on the line for Canada. We owe them a great debt. This is one of the reasons why we have a huge focus in our Canada Recovery Plan on mental health funding and on mental health strategies that will be of use all the way across the system. We value our veterans and we thank them for their patriotism.
Thank you. Paul.
Well, I've been a strong advocate for veterans in the House of Commons. We need to treat our veterans much better than we do. We have homeless veterans in this community. We have veterans that are dealing with PTSD and other serious health issues. And we owe them a debt, not just of gratitude, but to ensure that Veterans Affairs is functional and that they are getting the support that they need, both financially, with mental health services and the health services that they require.
Stephen.
We, of course, have tremendous respect for our veterans. I was very proud at one of the meet and greet events that we had that a veteran came up to shake my hand. He was very supportive of the PPC, wanted to meet me and discuss the party platform. And I was able to happily tell him of the respect that we have for veterans, and this is one area where we're generally not in favor of the tax, but there has to be more spending on our veterans.
Lisa Marie.
I had the honor of speaking with a veteran recently at the door, as I do every day, knocking on doors, and he talked to me about his story of serving our country and returning to a life that he could not afford. He can't afford the housing that he needs to keep a roof over his head. He can't afford the mental health supports that he needs that could be covered under a universal Pharmacare, but instead he's paying out of pocket to be able to go see a counselor to help him through the PTSD that he experienced while serving our community. It is time that we start helping and supporting our veterans as they return to Canada.
Thank you. Michelle.
I just want to acknowledge the veterans, young and old. We have some very young veterans that have come back. Mental health, the Liberal government is going to invest significantly in mental health. This is one of the areas I think that we can make the biggest difference. As well as for the seniors, we are going to increase OAS by 10% for those over 75 and GIS by 500 for single seniors and 750 for couples starting at 65.
Thank you. Paul will be our first respondent to a question, again with regard to fisheries, but specific to Indigenous fisheries that are not only a foundation to the history of this area, but are an important part of the local economies in this riding. First Nations peoples live and land fish in our islands' coastal communities. They could do more so if they had better opportunities. Specifically, the Nuu-chah-nulth Nations have court-recognized commercial fishing rights, but their members have only very marginal opportunities while the federal government continues to delay and stall negotiations and refuses to provide opportunities that support their right. What will you do to support Indigenous fisheries and their important contribution to our coastal economies?
Well, I've met with the local 4 First Nations about fisheries, and what we need is a respectful relationship between the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and First Nations. So whether it is the shellfish industry, whether it is the food fishery, they are not getting the kind of respect that they deserve from DFO, and that's where this begins. these traditional fisheries, they are part of their economic well-being, and they're part of their traditional way of life and how they feed their communities, and we need to respect that.
Thank you. Stephen.
As I talked about with our platform on Indigenous issues, we feel it's important to move away from the existing paternalistic Indian Act and develop a system of greater self-reliance. Now, when it comes to things like fisheries, where it goes beyond the borders of a particular state, if you would like to call it, a jurisdiction, a self-government jurisdiction, there has to be cooperation.
Absolutely, we need to be ensuring that we are, following Indigenous rights through this. I've been in close communication with, as I said before, Bob Chamberlain, who's doing so much great work in this area to acknowledge Indigenous rights while protecting our environment and walking alongside Indigenous people to protect our environment and ensure that Indigenous nations are not having to choose between food on their table or conserving the environment. This is why Jagmeet Singh is committed to $500 million in Indigenous-led conservation.
Thank you. Michelle.
I was the vice president of the Nuu-chah-nulth Tribal Council when this case was in court. I also was well aware of the Conservative government's impacts to these fisheries. Hishikisawak is everything is one, everything is connected. I am from Ukilit, which is one of the Nuu-chah-nulth nations. We have a long way to go, but we can do it in partnership, and the Liberal government has made significant advancements with the Nuu-chah-nulth.
Thank you. Tamara.
We would work collaboratively with Indigenous rights holders and commercial harvesters to develop management plans that fulfill recognized rights, protect the sustainability of our fisheries, and ensure that coastal communities can continue to thrive. We'll work with stakeholders, First Nations, and regional jurisdictions to implement ecosystem-based fisheries management, including control of abundant predator populations, which impact commercial and SARA-listed species. Our fish population is incredibly important. It is part of a larger ecosystem.
Thank
and we
you.
need to take care of it.
Stephen's going to be the candidate to respond first to our last open round of questions before we invite our candidates to provide their closing remarks. What about your party leader makes them a good fit for Prime Minister?
Maxime Bernier has decades of experience in Parliament. He has had numerous positions in cabinet. He has, I think he's 58 years old now. That expresses his whole life has been in politics. And he is a man of values and principles. I've met him. That confirms for me what I always thought of his character. He's a man you can trust.
Lisa Marie.
It is definitely not hard to be a candidate in the NDP with our leader, Jagmeet Singh. He is, wow, he is just the most compassionate leader that I have ever come across. He speaks from the heart, and he's there because he cares, and people see it. People are excited to see a leader who is there not just to hear himself speak, but to truly fight for people, to fight for the environment. Jagmeet Singh works from a place of integrity. What he says, he follows through with, and he's there to fight for solutions for people.
Thank you. Michelle.
Well, this is the third time I'm running under Justin Trudeau. I find him empathetic, insightful, compassionate, and caring. He is a man of great integrity, and it has been an honor to work with him over these last years, and it would be an honor to continue to work with him.
Tamara.
I've known Aaron O'Toole for a very long time, and the thing I like most about him is that he is a great listener. And when Aaron listens, he really hears you, and he works to translate what you've said into policy. And that's how we ended up with such a comprehensive plan, Canada's Recovery Plan. I'd urge you to go take a look at it. It is a detailed plan for recovery that we're ready to implement next Tuesday.
Thank you. Paul?
Well, all of the pundits said that Annamie Paul won the national leaders debate. She is a strong, intelligent woman with a long background and history in diplomacy. She knows how to express herself and do the research needed, and to work cooperatively with other people. And of all the squabbling that went on at the leaders debate, she was above the fray.
Thank you. Prior to our panel this evening, our candidates drew cards to determine the order of closing remarks, and our first closing remarks will come from Lisa Marie.
What we need now is the courage to act together, and that is exactly what New Democrats will do. We can afford to make life better for everyday people by investing in childcare, affordable housing, and of course, Pharmacare. We can fight the climate crisis and create good, clean jobs. And we can undertake the important work of reconciliation alongside Indigenous people. This time, vote for a stronger voice in Parliament. Vote for the party that has a proven track record of fighting for you. This time, vote for Jagmeet Singh and Lisa Marie Barron for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thank you. Closing remarks, Stephen?
Thank you. All of this that you've heard tonight, all this talk, all this politicking, all these promises, this is all going to be meaningless if we don't get our freedoms back, if we don't get our rights back. My fellow candidates have spoken of various taxes they can apply, various ways they can take money from one and give to another. They're basically arguing how far to the left they all are. And they're playing this con game that we're all about to die from either COVID or climate change unless we do what they say. And I don't buy into the hysteria they're creating, and I'm not saying COVID isn't real. I'm not saying climate change isn't real. I just don't believe we're all about to die from them. I don't fall for it. Let's get back to our normal lives. Let's get back to a society with mutual respect and less division. Let's get back to living.
Thank you. Michelle?
As a lifetime third-generation citizen of Nanaimo, I understand our complex issues. I meet voters in our riding daily, and I'm told repeatedly that Nanaimo Ladysmith needs an active voice in Ottawa with the government in power who can advocate the interests of the residents in this riding. I'm asking for your support to elect me as Member of Parliament for this riding. I will have a seat at the table with decision makers, and I will advocate strongly for our issues. We need a strong, competent voice that can get things done in Ottawa that ensures Nanaimo Ladysmith receives its fair share of federal investments to support our families, children, and seniors, pandemic economic recovery, community and infrastructure, and fighting and preparing for climate change. I will be that advocate and strong voice for Nanaimo Ladysmith. Vote Michelle Corfield on September 20th.
Thank you. Paul?
I'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this debate. Since my election in 2019, I've been working hard as the MP for Nanaimo Ladysmith. I've listened to the concerns of constituents and worked on solutions for them. I'm transparent, accountable, and accessible. Ending the affordable housing and homelessness crisis, fixing long-term care, building a resilient local economy, working towards true reconciliation with First Nations, and fighting for bold action on climate change have all been top priorities for me. I encourage people to visit my website, paulmanley.ca, where you can find links to my work in Parliament and read the words of the people who've endorsed me. On September 20th, I'm looking for your support again. Please send me back to Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you. Tamara?
Tonight, you heard two very different visions of how we should move forward. The Liberals, NDP, and Greens' high-tax, overspending ways will keep your cell phone, grocery, rent, and tax bills high, taking money out of your pocket, driving up the cost of living, and putting the dream of owning a home further out of reach. not just for us, but for our children, our grandchildren, and beyond. Conservatives have the right plan to secure jobs and secure our economy to make life more affordable while making smart investments in our future. It's in your hands. Canada's Conservatives are the only ones who can stop Justin Trudeau. On Monday, please vote for change. Vote Conservative. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. And it's my pleasure to turn the microphone back over. I think I ran a little bit long. So thank you, candidates, and thank you, everybody who came to join us this evening to hear from our candidates and understand the choices that we have on Election Day. Thank you.